a lot of it's really about looking at what's right for your organization. If that presentation isn't as important, then the phone may be just fine. But if it's something where you need somebody who has that professionalism, that poise, that carrying themselves, because maybe they're going to be in sales, that's important too. The other thing I always think about is what's the team structure. You know, Rachel mentioned she's got multiple locations. So assessing someone's ability to communicate over Skype and phone is really critical in a virtual environment, because that's how they're going to be doing most of their communication. Whereas in Chris's example, assessing how they can function on the floor doing the sampling is more critical. And so it's building your process based upon what's going to actually assess the person's skills that they need to be using. Then the other piece of that is the behavioral interviews. Anyone familiar with the concept of behavioral interviews? So essentially, a behavioral interview is asking them about experiences they've had and behaviors that to understand their approach in different behavioral situations. There's also situational interviews, which I'm not as big a fan of, because those are more of your what-if scenarios. So behavioral would be me asking Steve here, can you tell me about a time you dealt with a challenging client? So now Steve is required to tell me about his experience dealing with a challenging client. And if he's really good, he's going to do it in a nice, concise format. I'm going to really understand that experience and feel good that Steve could handle our challenging clients. If I said to Steve, what would you do if somebody called you up to our customer service line and was yelling at you? That's more situational. And Steve's going to pull out his textbook answer of, I'm going to be patient and I'm going to listen. And I'm going to make sure I fully understand their concerns. And it's not going to be the real Steve, but if Steve tells me about a real example of a challenging situation, I'm actually going to get more insight into who Steve is. And if Steve skirts the issue, he's like, oh, well, if I ever had that, I would definitely just listen to what their issues were. Then we know Steve is either hiding something or has never dealt with a challenging client, and that's not reality, because every one of us has dealt with challenging customers. But it's asking those questions that get at what they've done in the past in certain situations that are relevant to what you're looking for. So after we've built that job description, we can take some of those activities that they're going to be doing and build questions to understand experiences they've had in the past using those skills. Now, we always have to remember that they're not going to have all the skills you need to do the exact job you have, so you want to keep it broad enough that they can show where there's transferability. If you're looking for somebody, a Java developer, and you're in the real estate industry, and you just want to find, you want to find someone who's got Java experience in the real estate industry, that may not be your most relevant direction. Is tell me about your experience coding in real estate, because their skills are in Java. And I'm going to guess most of us aren't Java developers, but Java's Java. If you know how to code it, you can code it for any industry. Now, an interest may be important, but it's about asking questions about their experiences of documenting their code or working with a team to build a portion of the product, not about your real estate experience. So it's really focusing your questions in that area.
I also want to go back to the process here. And when you've put together your job description and you're going through your process of selecting somebody and interviewing them, you want to be consistent in how you apply that process to all of your candidates. So you don't necessarily have to use the same process for all your positions, because you may want to treat the person who's doing development in New York differently than the person who's doing sales in Seattle. They may be very different interviewing processes. However, you want to treat all of the people going through the process in each of those categories the same way. It's going to decrease the potential liability, and you want to just be cautious about treating different people differently in any of these areas that we're going to talk about. So the questions you can't ask issue comes up a lot. How do I do interviews, and is my business so small that I don't have to worry about whether I'm technically discriminating? At what point does Amy's business, who only hires women to do the work, run into problems? Well, Hooters has done it for years, so, and there's case law behind all of that. So, eventually your business is going to get to a place where those considerations are going to be really important. And there are so many different state and federal laws that have protections for different classes of people, and they vary as to when they kick in. Age discrimination is 20 employees at the federal level. Civil Rights Act is 15 employees at the federal level. But City of Seattle, for example, and State of Washington has protections for sexual orientation, which may apply to one employee. And so being very cautious if you are choosing certain kinds of people to come into your business. You want to know where you might run into pitfalls. Most small businesses, the general mentality is that you can choose who you want to work with, but you want to be really careful in that process. So your best bet, obviously, is to do kind of blind baseline interviewing. Don't take into account gender, sexual orientation, race, national origin, religion, any of those things in your decision-making process. There's a case from a number of years ago where there was, I think it was a law firm, and the person was writing notes on the resumes to remember who the people were. So it was, blonde blue suit, smiley guy, different things like that on the resumes. Well, if you're keeping all of that as part of your systems, which you should be doing, your interview notes, how you made your selection, that could very quickly get you into trouble when the cute blonde pregnant woman isn't hired. It happens. So be careful about what notes you take and what you're going to keep as part of your record keeping on your interviewing. You should keep records in your process for selecting somebody, but make sure those records reflect the actual unbiased decision-making process. So be careful there. Don't ask the obvious questions about, what's your family situation? Do you have children? Are you married? Where do you go to church? All of those things are not really great interview questions. They are not relevant to the job, and so keep your interview questions focused on what the job requirements are and the skill set you need. Did you have a question?
You started to go through a few of them. What were some of the big glaring landmines, stuff to stay away from? You said, gender, family, children, church, religion.
Health, disabilities, age, national origin, race.
You've hit all of the topics.
I was going to say, I'm trying to think if I wrote anything else down.
Ask about smoking.
Smoking is not a protected class. We actually just did some research for a client on this exact topic. They actually outsource dental hygienists as a temporary agency. And the smokers consistently are asked not to come back because of the smell around how close they are to clients. And so the dentists say, I don't want that person again. And so the client says, well, can I do that? Can I not hire smokers? And the answer today, legally, is yes, you can discriminate based on that. You can choose not to hire smokers because it's not a protected class. However, there is a little bit of movement in that space that, is this an addiction? Is this a disability? I mean, and it's possible. Alcoholism has been classified as an addiction, and therefore it's an illness, and you can't discriminate necessarily based on that unless it's going to impact job performance. And so, yes, for now, but I would keep an eye on it if that's something, a practice that you are using.